Today, we're revealing ancient techniques that beat refrigeration. Vikings developed 13 preservation secrets so effective that modern food scientists are still studying them today. Let's get started with their use of salt, but not in the way you may think. Seaweed salt preservation, the ocean's perfect preservative. Vikings living along the coast discovered something remarkable about seaweed that modern science has only recently validated. They could create a preservation medium using dried kelp and naturally evaporated sea salt that not only preserved food longer than modern refrigeration, but actually enhanced its nutritional value. The process was elegantly simple, but incredibly effective. Vikings would harvest kelp during low tide, dry it completely, then grind it into powder. This kelp powder was mixed with coarse sea salt to create a preservation medium packed with over 60 trace minerals that modern processed salt completely lacks. What made this technique superior to modern refrigeration was its active preservation properties. While your refrigerator simply slows bacterial growth, seaweed salt actually creates an environment where beneficial bacteria thrive while harmful organisms are eliminated. The iodine and other compounds in kelp act as natural antimicrobials, creating preservation that improves food rather than just maintaining it. Modern research has confirmed what Vikings knew intuitively. Seaweed contains compounds that actively fight spoilage, while adding essential nutrients like iodine, potassium, and magnesium. Foods preserved in seaweed salt don't just last longer. They become more nutritious than when they were fresh. You can recreate this technique today using dried kelp powder available at health food stores. Mix it with coarse sea salt in a 1:4 ratio and use it to preserve fish, meat, or vegetables. Unlike refrigeration that requires constant electricity, seaweed salt preservation works indefinitely and actually improves with age. Smoke preservation, capturing fire's magic. Vikings elevated smoking from simple cooking to sophisticated preservation science, creating foods that could last months while developing flavors impossible to achieve any other way. They understood that smoke wasn't just about taste, it was about creating chemical compounds that actively prevented spoilage. Cold smoking was the Vikings' secret weapon for long-term preservation. Unlike hot smoking, which cooks food, cold smoking kept temperatures below 90 degrees Fahrenheit, while exposing foods to smoke for days or even weeks. This process created natural preservatives, formaldehyde, phenols, and other compounds that penetrated deep into the food, creating antimicrobial barriers. The wood choice mattered enormously. Vikings preferred hardwoods like oak, beech, and fruit woods that burned slowly and produced clean smoke. Different woods created different flavor profiles and preservation qualities. Oak provided strong preservation compounds, while fruit woods added subtle sweetness, along with antimicrobial properties. What makes Viking smoking superior to modern refrigeration is its enhancement factor. Your refrigerator maintains food in a static state, slowly degrading over time. Viking smoking actually improved food, concentrating flavors while creating natural preservatives that made food safer and more nutritious than fresh alternatives. You can adapt Viking smoking techniques using modern equipment. Electric smokers or pellet grills can maintain the low temperatures Vikings achieved with careful fire management. The key is patience. True cold smoking takes days, not hours, but creates results that last months without any refrigeration. Underground earth ovens, slow cooking, meets long-term storage. Vikings discovered that certain underground cooking methods could simultaneously prepare and preserve food for months. These earth ovens, called Erdgrube in Old Norse, were sophisticated food processing systems that combined slow cooking with natural preservation in ways that modern appliances can't replicate. The process involved digging pits lined with stones, heating the stones with fire, then layering food with specific materials that created preservation environments. Seaweed, birch bark, and aromatic herbs weren't just for flavor, they created antimicrobial environments that preserved food while it cooked. What made earth ovens remarkable was their ability to break down tough proteins while creating preservation compounds. The slow, moist heat, combined with natural antimicrobials from plants, created food that was not only tender and flavorful, but could last for months without spoiling. It's like having a slow cooker and preservation system combined. Modern science has validated the Viking approach. The low-temperature, long-duration cooking breaks down collagen into gelatin, while plant compounds create natural preservatives. The sealed environment prevents contamination, while beneficial chemical reactions occur that actually improve food safety and nutrition. Unlike modern cooking that requires constant energy input, Viking earth ovens used stored heat from heated stones. Once sealed, they required no additional energy, while creating preserved food that could sustain families through entire winters. It's the ultimate sustainable food processing system. You can adapt earth oven principles using modern materials. Some homesteaders create above-ground versions using insulated containers and heated stones, achieving similar results to what Vikings accomplished underground thousands of years ago. Salt-cured fish, the original protein powder. Vikings perfected salt-curing techniques that could transform fresh fish into shelf-stable protein that lasted for years. This wasn't just about preservation, it was about creating concentrated nutrition that could sustain warriors and families through the harshest conditions. The process was elegantly simple but required precise technique. Fresh fish were cleaned, then packed in coarse sea salt that drew out moisture while infusing the flesh with preservative minerals. The salt created an environment where harmful bacteria couldn't survive, while beneficial changes occurred that actually improved the nutritional profile. Vikings understood that different fish required different curing times and salt ratios. Fatty fish like salmon needed more salt and longer curing times than lean fish like cod. They developed techniques specific to each species, creating products that could last months or even years without spoilage. What makes salt-cured fish superior to modern refrigeration is the concentration effect. While refrigerated fish slowly degrades, losing nutrients and developing off flavors, salt-cured fish becomes more nutritious and flavorful over time. The curing process concentrates proteins while creating beneficial compounds that don't exist in fresh fish. Modern chefs have rediscovered Viking-style curing techniques, creating gravlax, salt cod, and other delicacies using methods that haven't changed in 1,000 years. The difference is that we now understand the science behind what Vikings learned through trial and error. You can use Viking salt curing in your modern kitchen with remarkable results. Start with the freshest fish possible, coat completely in coarse salt, mixed with a small amount of sugar. Then refrigerate for 24 to 48 hours. The transformation creates something entirely different, firmer, more flavorful, and naturally preserved. Soapstone vessel storage, nature's perfect food containers. Vikings carved storage vessels from soapstone that created ideal preservation environments impossible to replicate with modern materials. These weren't just containers, they were sophisticated preservation systems that actively maintained food quality through natural mineral properties. Soapstone, composed primarily of talc, has unique thermal properties that Vikings exploited for food storage. It maintains consistent temperatures, absorbs excess moisture, and releases beneficial minerals that create antimicrobial environments. Modern plastic and glass containers are passive storage. Soapstone vessels actively preserve. The carving process itself was crucial. Vikings created vessels with specific shapes and surface textures that maximized preservation properties. Smooth interiors prevented bacterial adhesion, while carved exteriors increased surface area for moisture regulation. Every detail served preservation purposes. What made soapstone superior to modern containers was its active preservation properties. While your refrigerator containers simply hold food in a static environment, soapstone vessels create dynamic preservation through mineral exchange and moisture regulation. Food stored in soapstone often lasted longer than the same food in modern refrigeration. Vikings used different soapstone vessels for different foods. Dairy products were stored in vessels with specific mineral compositions that enhanced fermentation. Dried goods were kept in vessels that maintained optimal moisture levels. Each vessel was matched to its contents for maximum preservation effectiveness. Modern food storage relies on inert materials that don't interact with food. Viking soapstone vessels were active preservation partners, contributing minerals and creating environments that enhanced food safety and nutrition. It's the difference between passive storage and active preservation. You can find authentic soapstone vessels at specialty stores or antique shops. Many people report that food stored in soapstone stays fresh longer and tastes better than food stored in modern containers, validating what Vikings knew centuries ago. Fermented Sky, the original probiotic powerhouse. Long before anyone knew what probiotics were, Vikings were creating Skyer, a fermented dairy product that's like yogurt's stronger, more nutritious cousin. This wasn't just food preservation, it was food enhancement. Skyer actually became more nutritious the longer it aged, packed with beneficial bacteria that supported health through long, dark winters. Vikings made Skyer by adding a small amount of previous batch to fresh milk, then letting beneficial bacteria work their magic. The fermentation process created an acidic environment that prevented harmful bacteria while encouraging the good ones. The result was a thick, tangy dairy product that could last for months without spoiling. What made Skyr special was its incredible protein content, nearly twice that of regular yogurt. Vikings understood that this concentrated nutrition was essential for surviving harsh conditions. Warriors would eat Skyr before battles, believing it gave them strength and endurance. They weren't wrong. Modern analysis shows Skyr contains all essential amino acids and probiotics that support immune function. The fermentation process also created natural preservatives. As beneficial bacteria multiplied, they produced lactic acid, which lowered the pH, and created an environment hostile to spoilage organisms. It's the same principle used in modern fermented foods, but Vikings perfected it without understanding the science. Unlike modern refrigerated dairy that slowly degrades, losing nutrients and developing off flavors, properly fermented Skyr gets better with time. The beneficial bacteria continue working, creating more complex flavors and additional nutritional compounds that don't exist in fresh milk. You can make your own Skyr at home using the same basic technique Vikings used. Start with high-quality milk and a small amount of cultured buttermilk as a starter. Heat the milk gently, add the starter, then let it ferment at room temperature for 12 to 24 hours. Strain through cheesecloth to achieve the thick consistency Vikings prized. Birch bark wrapping, nature's antimicrobial packaging. Vikings discovered that birch bark possessed remarkable preservation properties that modern packaging materials can't match. This wasn't just convenient wrapping, it was active food preservation that extended shelf life, while adding beneficial compounds that enhanced nutrition and safety. Birch bark contains betulin and other compounds that act as natural antimicrobials and antioxidants. When Vikings wrapped food in birch bark, these compounds slowly migrated into the food, creating preservation effects that continued working long after wrapping. Modern plastic wrap is inert. Birch bark is actively protective. The harvesting and preparation of birch bark required specific knowledge. Vikings knew which trees to harvest from, when to collect bark for optimal preservation properties, and how to prepare it for different types of food storage. Different bark preparations were used for different foods, maximizing preservation effectiveness. What made birch bark superior to modern packaging was its breathability combined with antimicrobial properties. While plastic wrap creates anaerobic environments that can promote harmful bacteria, birch bark allowed controlled air exchange while preventing spoilage organisms from taking hold. Vikings used birch bark wrapping for everything from cheese and butter to dried meats and fish. The bark not only preserved these foods, but often improved their flavor, adding subtle woody notes that enhanced rather than masked natural tastes. It's like having packaging that seasons your food while preserving it. Modern research has confirmed the antimicrobial properties of birch bark compounds. Some specialty food producers have returned to birch bark wrapping for artisanal products, finding that it creates preservation and flavor effects impossible to achieve with modern materials. You can experiment with birch bark wrapping if you have access to birch trees. Harvest bark in late spring when it peels easily, then use it to wrap cheeses, butter, or other foods. Many people report enhanced flavors and extended shelf life compared to modern wrapping materials. Mead preservation, liquid preservation magic. Vikings didn't just drink mead for celebration. They used it as a preservation medium that could keep other foods safe for years while creating complex, delicious flavors. Mead was essentially liquid preservation magic, combining honey's preservative properties with alcohol's antimicrobial effects. The fermentation process that creates mead produces alcohol levels high enough to kill harmful bacteria while preserving beneficial flavors. Vikings discovered that fruits, herbs, and even small pieces of meat could be preserved in mead almost indefinitely. The alcohol acted as a solvent, extracting flavors, while the honey provided preservation. Making mead was surprisingly simple, just honey, water, and wild yeasts that occur naturally on fruit skins or in the environment. Vikings would mix honey with water, add fruits or herbs for flavor, then let natural fermentation work its magic. The process could take weeks or months, but the result was a beverage that improved with age and never spoiled. What makes mead preservation superior to modern methods is its enhancement factor. While modern preservation maintains food in a static state, mead preservation creates dynamic flavor development. Foods preserved in mead become more complex and interesting over time, developing flavors impossible to achieve through refrigeration. Vikings used mead to preserve seasonal fruits that would otherwise spoil quickly. Berries, apples, and herbs were fermented in honey water mixtures, creating flavored meads that provided both nutrition and preservation. These fruit meads could last for years, providing vitamin C and other nutrients during winter months when fresh produce was unavailable. The alcohol content in mead, typically 8 to 15%, is high enough to prevent spoilage, but low enough to remain drinkable. This made it perfect for long sea voyages, where fresh water might become contaminated. Mead provided hydration, calories, and preservation all in one package. Fermented fish paste, concentrated protein. Preservation. Vikings created fermented fish pastes that concentrated protein into forms that could last for years, while providing intense nutrition in small amounts. This technique, similar to Asian fish sauces, created preservation that was both practical and nutritionally superior to fresh fish. The process involved layering fish with salt in wooden containers, then allowing controlled fermentation to break down proteins while creating natural preservatives. The result was a concentrated paste that could be stored indefinitely and used to add protein and complex flavors to other foods. What made fermented fish paste remarkable was its nutritional density. A small amount provided complete proteins, essential amino acids, and beneficial compounds created during fermentation that don't exist in fresh fish. Vikings understood that this concentration was essential for surviving long voyages and harsh winters. The fermentation process created natural preservatives while breaking down fish proteins into more digestible forms. Beneficial bacteria produced compounds that actively prevented spoilage while enhancing nutritional availability. It's like having a protein supplement that makes itself, unlike modern protein powders that require industrial processing. Viking fish paste was created through natural fermentation that enhanced rather than degraded nutritional value. The living fermentation continued to create beneficial compounds long after the initial processing was complete. Vikings used fermented fish paste as a flavoring agent and protein supplement. A small amount added to porridge, stews, or bread provided complete nutrition while adding complex, savory flavors that enhanced simple foods. It was like having a nutritional enhancer that never spoiled. You can create similar fermented fish products using modern techniques, though food safety requires more careful monitoring than Vikings had available. The basic principle of controlled fermentation to concentrate and preserve protein remains sound and effective. Fat preservation, the original vacuum sealing. Vikings discovered that animal fat could create an oxygen-free environment that preserved meat for months while actually improving its flavor and texture. This technique, which the French later refined into comfit, was essential for surviving long winters when fresh meat was unavailable. The process worked through simple physics. Meat was slowly cooked in its own fat at low temperatures, then stored completely submerged in the rendered fat. The fat created an airtight seal that prevented spoilage bacteria from reaching the meat while infusing it with rich flavors that developed over time. Vikings used this technique primarily with pork and duck, animals that provided abundant fat for the preservation process. The slow cooking broke down tough connective tissues, while the fat penetration created incredibly tender, flavorful meat that could be stored for months without refrigeration. What made this technique brilliant was its efficiency. Nothing was wasted. The fat that preserved the meat could later be used for cooking, providing concentrated calories and flavor. The preserved meat could be eaten cold or reheated, making it perfect for travel or emergency situations. Unlike modern vacuum sealing that simply removes air, fat preservation actively improves food while preserving it. The slow cooking process breaks down proteins, while fat penetration creates flavors and textures impossible to achieve through other methods. It's preservation that enhances rather than maintains. The transformation that occurs during fat preservation is remarkable. Tough cuts become incredibly tender, while flavors concentrate and develop complexity. Vikings prized this transformation, understanding that preservation could actually improve food rather than just maintain it. You can use Viking fat preservation techniques in your modern kitchen with excellent results. Duck legs, pork shoulder, and other fatty cuts work best. The meat is seasoned, slowly cooked in fat, then stored in the cooking fat, which solidifies and creates an airtight seal when cooled. Peat bog storage, nature's underground refrigerator system. Vikings discovered that peat bogs could preserve foods for literally centuries, creating storage conditions that modern refrigeration can't match. These weren't just convenient storage spots. They were sophisticated preservation environments that actively maintained food quality through unique chemical and physical properties. Peat bogs are nature's perfect preservation chambers. They're cool, acidic, and completely oxygen-free. The pH level is similar to vinegar, which stops harmful bacteria dead in their tracks. The lack of oxygen prevents spoilage, while the consistent cool temperature keeps everything stable. It's like having a natural vacuum-sealed refrigerator that never needs electricity. Vikings used peat bog storage for more than just the famous bog butter. They preserved cheese, meat, and even prepared foods in these natural preservation chambers. The acidic environment, created by decomposing plant matter, acted as a natural preservative, while the anaerobic conditions prevented spoilage bacteria from surviving. What makes peat bog storage superior to modern refrigeration is its active preservation properties. While your refrigerator simply maintains temperature, peat bogs create chemical environments that actively preserve food. The natural acids and tannins in peat act as preservatives, while the stable conditions prevent degradation. Modern food scientists have tested thousand-year-old foods recovered from peat bogs and found them still technically edible. The preservation is so complete that even cellular structures remain intact after centuries. No modern preservation method can achieve this level of long-term stability. Vikings understood that different areas of bogs provided different preservation conditions. They selected specific locations based on acidity levels, temperature stability, and accessibility. This knowledge was passed down through generations like precious family secrets. While most people don't have access to peat bogs, you can adapt the principles using acidic, cool, oxygen-free environments. Some modern homesteaders create bog-like conditions using peat moss, controlled acidity, and sealed containers to achieve similar preservation results. Ash preservation, alkaline magic for long-term storage. Perhaps the most surprising Viking preservation technique involved using wood ash to create alkaline environments that could preserve foods for months or even years. This wasn't just clever recycling, it was sophisticated chemistry that modern food scientists are only beginning to fully understand. Vikings discovered that certain foods could be preserved in lye made from wood ash, creating an alkaline environment that prevented spoilage while transforming textures and flavors in remarkable ways. The most famous example is lutefisk, fish preserved in ash lye that becomes gelatinous and can last for months without refrigeration. The process worked through pH manipulation. Wood ash creates potassium hydroxide when mixed with water, producing a highly alkaline solution that kills harmful bacteria while breaking down proteins in controlled ways. Vikings didn't understand the chemistry, but they perfected the technique through generations of experimentation. Creating ash lye required specific knowledge about wood types and ash preparation. Vikings preferred hardwood ash from oak, beech, or birch, which produced the strongest alkaline solutions. The ash had to be fresh and properly prepared. Old or contaminated ash could ruin the entire preservation process. What makes ash preservation superior to modern methods is its transformative properties. While modern preservation maintains food in a static state, ash preservation creates entirely new foods with different textures, flavors, and nutritional profiles. It's preservation that creates rather than maintains. The transformation that occurs during ash preservation is remarkable. Tough, fibrous foods become tender and gelatinous, while flavors develop complexity that can't be achieved through other preservation methods. Vikings prized these transformations, understanding that preservation could create entirely new foods. Modern applications of Viking ash preservation techniques are limited by food safety concerns, but the principles remain sound. Understanding alkaline preservation helps explain how traditional foods like hominy, lutefisk, and certain pickles achieve their unique characteristics and long shelf life. Honey preservation, the immortal sweetener. Vikings treasured honey above almost everything else, and for good reason. It's the only food that literally never spoils. Archaeologists have found honey in Egyptian tombs that's over 3,000 years old and still perfectly edible. Vikings knew this secret and used honey not just as food, but as a preservation medium for other foods. The magic of honey lies in its unique chemistry. It's essentially a moisture vacuum. Bacteria and other microorganisms can't survive in honey because it sucks all the water out of them. Add to that honey's natural acidity and the enzymes from bee saliva that create hydrogen peroxide, and you've got nature's most perfect preservative. Vikings used honey to preserve fruits, nuts, and even small pieces of meat. They'd completely submerge foods in honey, creating an environment where nothing could spoil. Think of it as the original vacuum sealing, except the vacuum was created by honey's moisture-absorbing properties. What makes honey preservation superior to modern methods is its enhancement factor. While modern preservation maintains food quality, honey preservation actually improves it. Foods preserved in honey develop complex flavors while gaining the nutritional benefits of honey itself. It's preservation that adds value rather than just maintaining it. Unlike modern preservatives that are chemical additives, honey is a whole food that provides nutrition while preserving. Foods preserved in honey gain antioxidants, enzymes, and other beneficial compounds that enhance rather than compromise nutritional value. You can use honey preservation today with remarkable simplicity. Raw, unprocessed honey works best, the kind you'd get from a local beekeeper. Completely submerge fruits like berries or sliced apples in honey, and they'll keep for months without refrigeration while developing incredible flavors. For nuts, Vikings would coat them in honey and let them dry slightly, creating what we might recognize today as honey-roasted nuts. These could be stored for years and provided concentrated nutrition during long voyages or harsh winters. It's like having an energy bar that makes itself. These 13 Viking preservation secrets represent more than ancient survival skills. They're proof that working with nature beats fighting against it. While we've become dependent on energy-hungry refrigeration, Vikings created food security using natural processes that often enhance nutrition and flavor. If you have enjoyed raiding the past with us, then pillage that like and subscribe button for more interesting discoveries from Midgard living.